Hey everybody, Nick here, and today got some disassembly and maintenance for you to do on this, or for me to do, I suppose. You ain't helping. Although you're helping moral support. Anyways, maintenance on this little guy right here. This is the Ferrum Forge Prolix. So, full disclosure, and actually vaguely entertaining disclosure. This guy was provided to me by the manufacturer, although perhaps a little bit more directly than I'm used to. What happened, actually, is yesterday the wife and I are out and about. We are at a Home Depot, which is a hardware store specializing in, well, selling things for the home. Right, and then picking up some light bulbs, picking up some stuff, as well as materials to fix a lamp, whatever. I digress. We are sitting there, and we're walking down the aisle, and then suddenly, hey, Nick. And indeed, it's Elliot from Ferrum Forge. As you might recall, the Ferrum Forge is also in the San Diego, not so far from me. And, he and I get to talking, and eventually introduce the wife and whatnot. We're mostly complaining about Star Wars, right? The new ones, that is. But nonetheless, he says, hey, did you pick up a Prolix? I said, no, not yet, but I'm thinking about it. And he just reaches into his pocket, pulls this one out, and says, here you go. Easy, right? The shipping was A+ fast. But anyways, so this guy actually comes to me directly from Elliot from Ferrum Forge's pocket via Home Depot. And as a result, we can see some evidence of carry here. And we do have to assume this was literally the best quality controlled one of these guys ever. And I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature of my review, but there you go. In terms of disassembly, so far so good, right? I took out the 2 screws here along with the clip. That gives me access to, as I thought, a set of screws in the back here, and the reason I thought that is because, well, it would make sense that there has to be something going through the back spacer, and then the clip area, that ain't it. So we'll take these liners off here. And then go on ahead and take the thing the rest of the way apart. There we go. So what we see here is this is actually a little bit on the grody side. Hey, thanks, Elliot, for the dirty knife. Not actually complaining. But so we'll get actually a chance to clean this guy out, and this guy has presumably seen a little bit of use. Yeah. Let's go on ahead and get this guy cleaned up. I'm going to use some 91% rubbing alcohol here. The reason for that is because it's a very nice little degreaser, and also happens to be reasonable for disinfecting, although not that I suspect Elliot to be diseased or anything. Although for disinfection, you probably want to use the 71 version. Anyways, I digress. So yeah, clean this guy on up. What I'm seeing construction-wise is roughly unsurprising to me. There is no part of this that is particularly different or interesting relative to some of Ferrum Forge's other knives, like Mini Archbishop, etc. The construction is pretty much identical. That's not a bad thing, mind you. The construction is A-okay, but it is unsurprising, fundamentally. Going ahead and I'm cleaning out this little area here, and cleaning off your detent ball track. And I'd say we can call the blade ready to go. Let's go on ahead and wipe off the liners here. I'll pop off this back spacer, even though what we're seeing actually is that the screw is going straight through to the spacer on the other side. Is this steel or tie? Let me grab my utility mat. That would be steel. All right. Problem solved. Yeah. So I just used a set of magnets to check that. And by the way, if you're curious about this or any of the other tools I'm using, although I don't think the magnets are on there, but literally, dudes, it's a magnet. You don't need a recommendation on that. But if you're curious about any of the tools I'm using, go ahead and check out nickshabazz.com/tools, and it will have a complete listing of all of the toolification that you will see on the channel, and give you some details there. All right. Cleaning. Easy peasy. Lemon freaking squeezy. In a lot of ways, I can understand and appreciate when makers are reusing some of their innards of the pocket knives, right? I get it. And, if something works well, I don't see a whole lot of need to change that up. And honestly, this feels like a lot of other knives right now. This kind of feels a lot like, the construction of this feels a lot like Civivi, coming from We Knives, which makes sense, because, by the way, this is a knife that is produced by We Knives, although Ferrum Forge is based in San Diego, and most of their knife making, these days at least, most of their products are being made by We Knives overseas. Got relationships with the factories over there. So, I want to be clear about that. This is an American company, And they have an American shop where they do a lot of the custom stuff. In fact, I think they do all of the custom stuff. But We Knives is making the actual physical pocket knives. So there is that. I'm just cleaning a little extra because I'm feeling a little bit of grit. And that would make sense if it's in the pocket of a guy who's at a blade grinder regularly. Or, you know, customizing things. Is this rolling right? Okay, now it's rolling right. There was a little bit of grit still stuck in there. And yeah, now we're rolling. Good. That is, of course, one of the downsides of bearing-based knives, is that they do tend to have, they're a little bit more encumbered, so to speak, by grit and that kind of thing, grime. They can get into the bearings, whereas with a phosphor bronze washer knife, you know, generally speaking, the bearings are rotating like this. There's not really a chance for the bearings to get, or I'm sorry, the gunk to get inside the washers as readily. So, you know, yeah. All right, let's go ahead and put this guy back together. To start with, we see that this pivot is keyed in an interesting way. You can see there is this little triangular bit, and that goes into this little triangular bit. And so I'll go ahead and I'll insert that in there. That keeps the pivot from rotating, which is a beautiful thing. It is a major improvement from some of Ferrum Forge's earlier knives, where I dragged those poor guys over and over and over again, those poor guys. I dragged those guys. They can stand up for themselves. Over and over again for having untooled free spinning pivots. They have since learned. Or fixed it. I don't know whether they learned, but they're not doing it, so I guess it's better. But anyways, so there we go. Using a little bit of 10-weight nano oil here. Get everything rotating happily. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a little nano oil into the detent ball hole there, as well as into the bearing races. That will give, that'll put that there. Should clean off the stop pin, which is also a little bit on the dirty side. Enough gunk on the stop pin can actually cause lockup issues at a certain point. Usually failure to lock up if it gets too big, right? Because the knife stops before the lock bar is properly in place. I don't think it's anywhere near that at this point, but you do want to clean stop pins as well. That's not a bad idea. It is nice to actually, you know, disassemble and maintain a knife that's actually dirty, right? It's the downside to being a reviewer and looking at a bunch of factory fresh stuff. Is like most of the time I'm not really doing that much good. I'm not changing much about the situation. So, you know, yeah. What is going on here? Did I do that? I might have just unnecessarily re-oiled, but unnecessary oiling is the name of my game, so to speak. Oh, come off it. Get in the hole. Anyways, there's temptation because I'm immature, but not going there. I am going to be the adult in the room. No. Let's go ahead and insert these backspacer screws here. And then I'll use them. Actually, before I go too much further, I'm going to use a little bit of blue Loctite on a stick here. I'll just put a little bit of it onto these. There we go. Then I will slip this piece of, looks to be a carbon fiber, over them. Push the screws right on through. That should allow me to then place in a bearing. That's a useful detail. Do I have anything else I'm leaving out here? No. And then snap everything more into position. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lift up the lock bar there. Oh, that seems to have worked fine. But I'll go ahead then and tighten these screws down. I will need to do so before I go too much further in the process. As I'm doing this, actually, I'm going to disengage the blade, so to speak. I'll unlock it, and that just makes sure that there's not any residual tension in the system from that, and that everything can be in the right position. This should also let me move the stop pin, get that all squared away. Okay, beautiful. One thing that's worth noting when you have a pivot like this, these can work themselves out, as that one just did. So make sure that your pivot hasn't snapped out, because if this is not seated properly, as you put things back together, the whole thing is going to be, it's going to be loose, or more, maybe worse, it will snap in later on, and then the whole knife, you'll have a whole bunch of blade play suddenly out of nowhere, and you'll be trying to figure out what's up. And that's what's up. All right, go ahead and I'll wipe this off just in case. And drop this in position. All right. So, put this into the handle here. And actually, before I go too much further, let me go ahead and I'll put the pivot in. The reason I'm doing that is because if there's something wrong here, I need to have the carbon fiber scale on there before I install the pivot, because the pivot goes on top of the CF, but I also want to make sure that everything is working well before I put on all these other screws in the back here. Because in theory, if something's wrong with these back screws, if they're not tightened right or something like that, I could just take this screw out and then rotate the handle off to this. Whoa, that's too tight. I have brutally over-tightened that. Let's go ahead and that's better. No blade play. Still a little tight, I think. Let's loosen it up a little bit more here. All right. Yeah, that's good to go. All right. Now what I do is I reinstall these last two screws. I'll drop this screw in first. Go ahead and put a little Loctite on there. Can't hurt, might help. Not very often I go to Home Depot and come home with a knife, right? As one of I posted that story on Instagram last night, and somebody posted on there, between the two of you, that was the first time in years Home Depot's had a good knife in it. And that's kind of that's a thing, right? Hardware stores are wonderful places. They enable so many human activities, but by God, are they not a great place to buy a knife? So anyways, there we go. And for what it's worth, in my pocket, DRM Shadow. So yeah, there were some nice knives in there. But anyways, this guy is now put back together. It's running beautifully smooth. Life is good. And everything is cleaned up. So there you go. Hope this has been interesting to you. And I will not be needlessly prolix in this video. I'll save that for the review. And have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.